I want you to stop whatever you are doing for the next few minutes. Because what I am about to share with you is something that most doctors never sit down and explain. Not because they do not know, but because the system they operate inside simply does not reward them for spending 45 minutes talking to you about 3 seeds you can buy for a few dollars at any grocery store. I have been in preventive medicine and longevity research for years, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that the single biggest gap between what the science actually says and what reaches the average person is not about exotic pharmaceuticals or cutting edge gene therapies. It is about the foundational biology of how your cells protect themselves and how profoundly you can influence that biology through what you eat every single day. Here is the question I want to plant in your mind right now, the one I am going to answer in full before this is over. What is the exact biological mechanism that causes your retina to quietly degenerate for years before you ever notice anything is wrong? And is there a specific nutritional protocol with real clinical evidence behind it that can not only slow that process down, but in some cases partially reverse it? Because if you think the answer is simply take more vitamin A or wear sunglasses more often, you have been given an incomplete picture. The complete picture is far more interesting, far more empowering, and it involves a cascade of cellular events starting at the mitochondrial level inside your photoreceptor cells. Stay with me because that full answer is coming, and it includes the exact doses, the exact forms, and the exact timing that the research actually supports. But first, let me tell you why this matters so urgently right now. Age-related macular degeneration is the leading cause of irreversible blindness in adults over 60 in the developed world. Not cataracts, which are surgically correctable, not glaucoma, which can be managed with drops. Macular degeneration, which in its advanced form leaves a dark, blurred void right in the center of your visual field. The part you use to read a face, recognize a street sign, watch your grandchildren grow. And here is what the epidemiological data keeps telling us, loudly, year after year. The populations with the lowest rates of macular degeneration are not the ones with the best ophthalmologists. They are the ones with the highest dietary concentrations of specific polyunsaturated fatty acids, specific carotenoids, and specific trace minerals. That is not a coincidence. That is biology. Now, I want to be direct with you about something before we go any further, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort. The conventional approach to eye health in most clinical settings is reactive. You go in for your annual exam, the doctor checks your pressure, looks at your retina, maybe dilates your pupils, and if everything looks okay, you leave with a clean bill of health and come back in a year. That is the standard of care. And I am not here to criticize physicians. They are working inside a time-constrained, insurance-driven system that structurally penalizes deep nutritional counseling. But the result is that millions of people are walking around with retinal tissue that is under chronic oxidative siege, accumulating damage at the cellular level, and nobody is having that conversation with them until there is already measurable vision loss on a Snellen chart. Prevention is invisible on a chart. Damage accumulation is invisible on a chart, right up until the moment it suddenly is not. Here is the underlying biology you need to understand. Your retina is, pound for pound, one of the most metabolically active tissues in the entire human body. The photoreceptor cells, the rods that handle low-light vision, and the cones that handle color and central acuity, are firing continuously, converting photons into electrochemical signals at a rate that demands an extraordinary supply of oxygen and metabolic substrate. To sustain that level of activity, the retina is fed by one of the densest capillary networks in the body, a structure called the choriocapillaris, which sits just beneath the retinal pigment epithelium. Now, that retinal pigment epithelium, the RPE, is a single layer of cells that is essentially the maintenance crew for your photoreceptors. It recycles visual pigments, clears away metabolic waste, and regulates the flow of nutrients. When the RPE fails, photoreceptors die. When photoreceptors die, vision is gone, and it does not come back. The RPE does not regenerate in any clinically meaningful way in adult humans. This is not reversible terrain once you get far enough down the road. So what damages the RPE? Two primary forces: oxidative stress and chronic low-grade inflammation. Oxidative stress in the retina is uniquely intense because light itself, the very thing your eye exists to detect, generates reactive oxygen species inside photoreceptor outer segments as a byproduct of the phototransduction cycle. Every photon that hits a photoreceptor creates a small burst of oxidative activity. Do that billions of times a day for decades, and you need an extraordinarily robust antioxidant defense system to keep up. The other driver, chronic inflammation, works through cytokine-mediated pathways that degrade the tight junctions of the blood-retinal barrier, disrupt the RPE, and ultimately trigger complement activation cascades that the latest genetic research on AMD has now confirmed are central to its pathology. When you see genetic risk variants for macular degeneration, the vast majority of them cluster around complement pathway genes. Inflammation is not a side player here, it is a primary mechanistic driver. And now, here is where everything changes. Here is the turn in this story that I want you to really absorb. The nutrients capable of intervening in both of those pathways simultaneously, meaningfully, and safely are not sitting in some specialty compounding pharmacy behind a prescription pad. They are sitting in seeds, specific seeds that have been studied in peer-reviewed clinical literature, that have measurable effects on retinal carotenoid density, on inflammatory cytokine profiles, on tear film stability, on intraocular pressure regulation, and on the structural integrity of the macular pigment optical density that you can actually measure with modern imaging technology. This is not folk medicine. This is not wellness influencer content. This is published science, and it points at three seeds in particular with a consistency that I find genuinely remarkable. The first is flaxseed, and I do not mean flaxseed oil capsules sold at a supplement counter with a fancy label. I mean ground flaxseed, the whole seed mechanically disrupted so the cellular wall is broken and the contents are bioavailable, because if you swallow a whole flaxseed, it passes through your digestive tract largely intact. Flaxseed is the most concentrated plant-based source of alpha-linolenic acid, which is the omega-3 precursor fatty acid in the plant kingdom, the starting material your body uses to synthesize the longer-chain EPA and DHA that are the biologically active forms in ocular tissue. Now, I know someone is going to say, but the conversion rate of ALA to DHA in humans is low, somewhere between 2 and 10%. And that is true. That is a legitimate scientific point. But what the omega-3 literature on dry eye disease and retinal health consistently shows is that even the partial conversion, combined with the direct anti-inflammatory effects of ALA itself, produces clinically meaningful changes in tear film osmolarity, in meibomian gland function, and in the expression of pro-inflammatory eicosanoids in ocular surface tissue. A 2019 study in the journal Cornea found that ALA supplementation significantly improved both subjective dry eye symptoms and objective measures of tear film stability over 12 weeks. The DHA question is real, but it does not nullify the ALA data. Flaxseed also delivers lignans, which are phytoestrogen compounds with a secondary antioxidant function. These lignans, seco-isolera-cyresinol diglucoside being the dominant form in flax, are converted by gut bacteria into enterolactone and enterodiol, which have demonstrated the ability to reduce systemic inflammatory markers, including C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. Remember those cytokine-mediated inflammatory pathways I mentioned that degrade the blood-retinal barrier? Reducing systemic inflammatory tone is not irrelevant to ocular health. It is directly relevant to the underlying pathophysiology of AMD, diabetic retinopathy, and even glaucoma. And flaxseed also provides soluble fiber, which has well-documented effects on glycemic control and postprandial glucose response. And unstable blood glucose is one of the most aggressive accelerators of microvascular damage in the retinal capillary bed. If you are not controlling glycemia, you are not protecting your retina, regardless of what else you do. Flaxseed's fiber contribution to glycemic regulation is not a minor footnote. It is a significant mechanism. The practical protocol for flaxseed: 1 to 2 tablespoons of freshly ground flaxseed per day, ground from whole seeds in a dedicated spice grinder and stored in the refrigerator because the ALA oxidizes rapidly once the seed coat is broken. Do not buy pre-ground flaxseed in bulk and leave it at room temperature. You are getting oxidized lipids at that point, which is counterproductive. Add it to oatmeal, blend it into a smoothie, stir it into yogurt. The taste is mild and nutty. The commitment is 30 seconds a day. The biological payoff is significant. The second seed is chia, and this one has a nutritional profile so dense that it still surprises me when I lay it out fully. 2 tablespoons of chia seeds deliver approximately 5 grams of omega-3 ALA, more than most fish oil capsules, from a plant source, in a food that also provides 11 grams of fiber, about 4 grams of complete protein, and meaningful concentrations of calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and manganese. But for eye health specifically, what makes chia extraordinarily valuable is the combination of its omega-3 content with its carotenoid content, specifically lutein and zeaxanthin. And if there is a single piece of ocular nutritional science that has been most thoroughly validated in clinical literature, it is the role of macular carotenoids. Here is the mechanism, stated precisely. Lutein and zeaxanthin are xanthophyll carotenoids that preferentially accumulate in the macula of the retina to form what we measure clinically as macular pigment optical density. This pigment does 2 things simultaneously. First, it acts as a short wavelength light filter. Blue light, the 415 to 455 nanometer range that is most photochemically damaging to RPE cells, is selectively absorbed by the macular pigment before it can reach the photoreceptors in the underlying RPE. This is a physical optical filter inside your eye, and its density is directly and dose-dependently related to your dietary intake of lutein and zeaxanthin. Second, the carotenoids function as direct antioxidants in the tissue, quenching singlet oxygen and triplet-state photosensitizers generated during phototransduction. The AREDS-2 study, the Age-Related Eye Disease Study 2, run by the National Eye Institute with over 4,000 participants, found that supplementation with lutein and zeaxanthin significantly reduced the risk of progression to advanced AMD in people with existing intermediate disease. Macular pigment is modifiable. You can build it, you can measure it, and chia seeds contribute to it. Chia also has something I want to call attention to that rarely gets discussed in the context of eye health, and that is its exceptional hydrophilicity, its ability to absorb up to 12 times its weight in water and form a viscous gel matrix. When you consume soaked chia, that gel matrix slows gastric emptying and creates a sustained, blunted glycemic response to co-ingested carbohydrates. A 2010 study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition demonstrated that chia seeds meaningfully attenuated postprandial blood glucose elevation compared to control. And as I said earlier, glycemic control is not peripheral to retinal health, it is central. The same microvascular beds that are destroyed in diabetic retinopathy are the ones that nourish every retina, diabetic or not. Chronic glycemic variability accelerates their degradation in everyone. Chia is a tool for stabilizing that variability. Add 1 to 2 tablespoons of chia to your daily routine. You can soak them overnight in plant milk to make a pudding, blend them into a smoothie where they are completely undetectable, or simply stir them into water and drink them. Unlike flaxseed, whole chia seeds are bioavailable. You do not need to grind them because their cell walls break down adequately in the digestive tract even when whole. The only preparation that matters is adequate hydration, both for their digestive benefits and to prevent the gel matrix from becoming too thick in your esophagus if you consume a large amount dry all at once, which is not dangerous but is uncomfortable. Now, if you are finding this useful, and I genuinely hope you are, I want to ask you to take 1 second right now and hit the like button if you have not already. It takes you 0 effort, and it helps this information reach people who actually need it. These are the people who are not going to hear this from their doctor, who are not going to find it in a pharmaceutical pamphlet. If one person watching this protects their retinal health because of what they learned here, that is worth everything. So please, like this video and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. The third seed, and this is the one I want to spend the most time on because it addresses a specific mechanism that the other 2 do not cover as directly, is pumpkin seed, also known as pepita in its hold form. And I want to start with zinc because zinc deficiency and its relationship to retinal function is one of the most underappreciated clinical issues in aging populations. Here is the statistic I want you to sit with. According to data from the NHANES nutritional surveys, an estimated 40% of adults over 65 in the United States have dietary zinc intakes below the recommended level. 40%. And why does that matter for your retina specifically? Because the retina has the highest concentration of zinc of any tissue in the human body. The RPE is packed with zinc-dependent enzymes. Zinc is a required cofactor for alcohol dehydrogenase, the enzyme that converts retinol, vitamin A, into retinal, the actual chromophore molecule that sits inside your photopigments and captures light. Without adequate zinc, vitamin A cannot be properly processed in the retina, even if your systemic vitamin A status is perfectly fine. You can have normal serum retinol and still have impaired retinal function due to zinc insufficiency. This is a specific, documented, testable mechanism. The ARED's original study actually included zinc as a primary component of the supplementation protocol, finding that high-dose zinc supplementation, 80 milligrams per day as zinc oxide, reduced the risk of progression to advanced AMD by approximately 25% in high-risk individuals. Now, 80 milligrams is above what I would recommend from food alone. That is a therapeutic supplemental dose that requires monitoring for copper depletion because zinc and copper compete for the same intestinal transporters. But the baseline message is clear. Retinal zinc sufficiency is not optional. It is a prerequisite for retinal health. And pumpkin seeds provide it in a highly bioavailable form, delivering approximately 7 to 8 milligrams of zinc per 1 ounce serving. Pumpkin seeds are simultaneously rich in magnesium. 1 ounce provides roughly 40% of the daily recommended intake. And magnesium is where we get into the intraocular pressure and glaucoma connection that most people are completely unaware of. Magnesium deficiency has been associated in clinical studies with elevated intraocular pressure, which is the primary modifiable risk factor for glaucomatous optic nerve damage. The proposed mechanism involves magnesium's role in regulating smooth muscle tone in the trabecular meshwork, the drainage structure through which aqueous humor exits the eye, and its vasodilatory effects on the ciliary vasculature. A study published in Ophthalmologica found that magnesium supplementation improved peripheral visual field deficits in patients with normal tension glaucoma, a particularly insidious form of the disease where optic nerve damage occurs despite normal pressure readings. The hypothesis is that reduced ocular blood flow, driven partly by magnesium deficiency and resultant vascular dysregulation, is a contributing factor. Pumpkin seeds, by providing substantial dietary magnesium, are supporting vascular tone in the ocular circulation in a way that is mechanistically coherent and clinically meaningful. Pumpkin seeds also deliver vitamin E in the tocopherol form, specifically alpha-tocopherol and gamma-tocopherol, which are fat-soluble antioxidants that protect the polyunsaturated fatty acid-rich membranes of photoreceptor outer segments from lipid peroxidation. Lipid peroxidation in photoreceptor membranes is one of the primary initiating events in the formation of drusen, the small lipid protein deposits in Bruch's membrane that are the earliest visible sign of AMD on fundoscopic examination. Vitamin E does not stop drusen formation entirely, but the epidemiological evidence is consistent. Higher dietary vitamin E intake is associated with lower risk of both nuclear cataract formation and AMD progression. The mechanism, membrane lipid protection in a tissue extraordinarily rich in oxidizable polyunsaturated fatty acids, is exactly what you would predict from the biochemistry. And then there is the carotenoid story again, because pumpkin seeds are a meaningful source of lutein and zeaxanthin as well, reinforcing the macular pigment building effect we talked about with chia. What I want you to see is that these three seeds are not doing isolated, redundant things. They are working through complementary and additive mechanisms. Omega-3 fatty acids for tear film and anti-inflammatory signaling, macular carotenoids for optical filtering and direct antioxidant protection in the retina, zinc for photopigment regeneration and RPE enzyme function, magnesium for vascular tone and intraocular pressure regulation, vitamin E for membrane lipid protection, lignans for systemic inflammatory modulation, fiber for glycemic control. This is a multi-pathway nutritional strategy that addresses the actual biology of retinal aging in a way that no single supplement and no single pill can replicate, because the synergistic interactions between these compounds in a whole food matrix behave differently, more beneficially than any of them in isolation. Now let me give you the practical protocol in full, because this is the part I promised at the beginning and I am delivering it now. Every morning, start with 1 tablespoon of freshly ground flaxseed added to your first meal, your oatmeal, your yogurt, your smoothie. Every day, add 2 tablespoons of chia seeds to a liquid of some kind, whether soaked overnight into a pudding or blended fresh. Every day, consume about 1 ounce of raw or lightly roasted pumpkin seeds as a snack, not heavily salted, not coated in oil, just the seed itself, which already has a pleasant, slightly nutty flavor that most people enjoy. If you do these 3 things consistently, not occasionally, not when you remember, but as daily, non-negotiable habits, the way you brush your teeth, you are delivering to your retina, your RPE, and your ocular vasculature a sustained supply of the nutrients that the peer-reviewed literature identifies as most protective against the age-related degenerations that rob people of their vision. There are a few things I want you to be careful about. First, if you are on blood-thinning medications, warfarin, apixaban, rivaroxaban, any anticoagulant, talk to your prescribing physician before dramatically increasing your omega-3 intake from any source, because omega-3 fatty acids have mild antiplatelet effects that are generally safe but should be disclosed. Second, if you have inflammatory bowel disease or compromised intestinal function, introduce these seeds gradually and monitor your tolerance, starting with smaller amounts. Third, if you have a documented pumpkin seed allergy, obviously do not eat pumpkin seeds. Tree nut and seed allergies can cross-react, and this is not something to experiment with. For the vast majority of people, these seeds are safe, affordable, accessible, and genuinely effective. The side effects are better digestion, better glycemic control, better cardiovascular markers, and better sleep quality from the magnesium, none of which are problems. I want to close by coming back to something foundational. Prevention is an act of self-respect. When you make the decision to nourish your retina before it shows signs of damage, you are making a statement about how much you value your future quality of life. Vision is not just a sensory function. It is your primary interface with the world you love. It is how you see the people you love. It is how you maintain independence, autonomy, and engagement with everything that makes life rich. Once significant macular damage has occurred, we are in damage control territory. But right now, today, the window for meaningful prevention is open, and 3 seeds can help you walk through it. A tablespoon of ground flax in the morning. 2 tablespoons of chia in a midday smoothie. A small handful of pumpkin seeds in the afternoon. That is the protocol. That is the science. That is your retina protected. If this video gave you something real, a mechanism you did not know, a tool you can actually use, please like it right now and subscribe so I can keep bringing you this kind of evidence-based content.